Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for...
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy's Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hope you're having a great start to your week. It's Wednesday. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's Twitter, YouTube, the Indy Sports Ticket app. Maybe you're just listening on 1430 AM. No matter how you're tuning in, it is greatly appreciated. I also greatly appreciated yesterday Gus Bradley's press conference, right? Middle of the week. He's got to sit down. He has to answer all these questions about the horrendously bad defensive performance that we saw from this Colts defense on Sunday. And yeah, I mean, it was pretty interesting to watch. He sat with the media yesterday for 10 minutes. All the questions were basically the exact same. All the questions had to do with what happened against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Here's my thing. It's Wednesday. We've beaten into the ground all the topics that have to do with that defense and how they performed on Sunday. We all know what happened. We all know that Indianapolis Colts defense played one of their worst games of the year on Sunday. Okay, at some point, not saying that we haven't done this, but I feel like we have to move on to the Tennessee Titans. It's hard to move on, though, right? When you're upset, frustrated, confused. Okay, the Colts defense had good performances against the Steelers and the Bears. It felt like things were moving in the right direction. Okay, and because it felt like things were moving in the right direction, and then all of a sudden the Colts defense reverted back to this can't defend the pass, can't really defend the run either defense. It's a little frustrating. The situation sounds a lot to me like, the first time a girl ever broke up with me. It was rough. I think everyone remembers the first time that they were broken up with. It's not a fun experience. It wasn't for me. I just remember I didn't date anyone until I got to college. Too dumb, lacked riz, as the kids say, to date anyone in high school. Thankfully, though, when I got to college, I kind of figured it out, started dating this girl. She went to a different school. Usually when guys say that, it means that they're lying and they aren't dating anybody. They just don't want to be a loser that doesn't have a girlfriend. But for me, like in my case, I wasn't lying. I was telling the truth. So I'll never forget, I took this long weekend, made a trip out to her school. We hung out all weekend. I had a good time. Seemed like she had a good time. I, went back home, went back to my school. Not even a week later, I get a phone call and she breaks up with me. I was upset. I was frustrated. I was confused because things were going well, much like after the Colts, performance on Sunday. The defense struggled. They had that horrendous performance and it seemed like things were going in the right direction. And then now it feels like everything is just kind of crumpled in on itself. And I remember after this girl broke up with me, two of my best friends came over to my apartment. We went and got Frosties. And one of them asked me how long it was going to take me to move on. This is my first girlfriend. I said without skipping a beat, I was like 2 weeks max. And then the other one chimed in. He was a bit older than me. And he goes, there's no way. No way you're moving on that fast. And he was correct because it's hard to move on. It just is. After watching the Colts on Sunday, it's hard to move on because the defense played its worst game of the year. Okay, if Anthony Richardson, winds up being a good NFL quarterback, all the people who've bought into the idea that he's never going to work out, they're going to have a hard time moving on from that opinion, right? Because sometimes it's just hard to move on, right? And when you saw the Colts defense put together back-to-back good performances against the Bears and the Steelers, and you knew that they were going into Jacksonville to play against one of the worst offenses in the NFL in terms of points per game, it seemed like things were destined to continue to go well. And then all of a sudden, Trevor Lawrence decided to be like, you know what? Let's start hitting some deep balls. And then you looked up and then it's like, oh, they scored 37 points. It's hard to move on from that. I got on Twitter last night and people were still talking about what happened on Sunday. And the media is in the same boat. They're still thinking and talking about what happened on Sunday. And that was obvious when they talked to Gus Bradley yesterday. Gus Bradley, he's taking a lot of heat. Okay, I appreciate him giving good, thorough answers. Okay, I don't think it's fun. I think it's hard to give good answers when you're facing this much scrutiny. And for 10 minutes, he gave good answers. For 9 of the 10 minutes, Gus Bradley answered questions that were related to what happened against Jacksonville. Okay, it took the Indianapolis Colts media 9 minutes to ask him the question that we all want to know the answer to. What's the plan moving forward? Seriously, like we have to move on to Tennessee. The Jacksonville game happened. At some point, you have to move forward, and you have to ask the question: how do you fix this? Okay, and I believe it was Stephen Holder who asked this question. He said, "What's the plan moving forward after cutting Dallas Flowers? What's the plan moving forward with all these injuries? What's the plan moving forward coming off of a bad performance on Sunday?" And calling it a bad performance feels, like bad's the wrong word. Like, what's the plan moving forward after, putting up your worst defensive performance of the season? And Gus Bradley gave a long, thorough answer about Dallas Flowers and how to improve despite all of these injuries. Here's Colts defensive coordinator Gus Bradley.
Well, first of all, let's talk about Dallas. I mean, love Dallas, love coaching him and what he was all about. He's a great man. And, this business is unfortunate that way. And, we've all been a part of it, going through tough times and challenges. And, I could go into more depth about him, but just as far as him as a man, but I have great respect for him. Now, as far as the roster, here's what I told the group, and here's what I think is important. Right after training camp, when we got together and we just named our 53, looked them in the eye and said, you all earned your opportunity to be a part of this 53. You were handpicked to be part of this 53. And, that because we trust you, because we believe in you, and we believe that if anything happens, you'll step up and make plays for us. So when I look back at it, we picked these 53. So that means if there's multiple injuries that take place, then these guys need to step up and they need to get their opportunity. We believed in them enough to bring them in as part of the 53. Now, when they get their chance to play, they got to showcase their abilities. And, that's what we're challenging now, to get them to believe that, we do have some injuries, but everybody has injuries across the league. And it's the guys that, there's always a story that takes place with these players, that come on, like Sam. I think Sam's playing, pretty good right now. He's doing some good things. He's making some plays. There's a story, we just got him, a week before the first game, and here he is playing, so there's stories that take place with these younger guys getting opportunity. And that's kind of the message to all of them. Be that story. Be that guy that we believed in to be a part of the 53. And when you get your opportunity, you shine.
Colts defensive coordinator Gus Bradley right there talking about this defense and how they move forward. It's no surprise he was complimentary of Dallas Flowers. I appreciate that he didn't make any excuses when asked about injuries, because he's right. He, Shane Steichen, the rest of this coaching staff had a hand in picking this 53-man roster. Okay, Chris Ballard obviously had the final say, but Gus Bradley and Shane Steichen and the rest of this coaching staff had a role in how they constructed this roster, and Gus Bradley obviously had a role in how they constructed the defense. Okay, he had a say, Gus Bradley did, and how they made up the depth of the roster. These players were chosen, and they need to step up. Okay, and look, Gus Bradley is going to continue to take the heat if the defense continues to struggle, because the defense struggled the last 3 years underneath him. And the criticism is deserved. I want to make that clear before I make these next statements. But he didn't miss tackles on Sunday. He didn't miss 6 tackles like EJ Speed did. He wasn't, out there on the field when, the Colts missed 3 tackles that allowed Tank Bigsby to have a 65-yard touchdown run. He wasn't, the one who bit on the double move that led to the Brian Thomas Jr. 85-yard touchdown pass. He didn't do that. The players, whether they're backups, starters, former practice squad guys, whoever, the players on the field have to step up and perform. Okay, I don't expect for all these backups to be perfect, right? Because they are backups for a reason. Even though they were selected to be on the roster, like there was a reason why they weren't selected to be the starters, because they aren't as good as whoever in front of them got hurt. But with that being said, like I expect them not to give up explosive plays. Okay? Like it's really that simple. The amount of explosive plays given up against Jacksonville has to be reduced. That's why they lost to the Jacksonville Jaguars. If you want to win games, if you want to score points, and you want to keep your opponent from scoring, you have to be explosive on offense in order to score points, and you have to limit explosives on defense. I talked about this earlier in the year, and people told me I was nuts because I said I'd rather have a quarterback, a guy like Anthony Richardson, that creates explosive plays rather than a guy that can hit a 3rd and 4 out route. Okay? Because like if you watch the NFL, you will notice that the teams that score the most amount of points are the teams that can generate these big explosive plays. And the teams that give up the most amount of points are the teams that allow the big explosive plays. Okay, like take the Colts game on Sunday. The Colts scored 24 points in the 4th quarter. And it wasn't because Joe Flacco consistently hits 3rd and 3 out routes. It's not why they scored 24 points in the 4th quarter. The reason why the Colts scored 24 points in the 4th quarter is because Alec Pierce had 3 big major play receptions. It wasn't because Michael Pittman Jr. caught, a 5-yard curl on 3rd and 4. It's not why the Colts put up a whole bunch of points. In fact, when you look at that Colts and Jaguars game, there's the only possession that resulted in a touchdown that didn't have an explosive play in it was the Colts opening drive. That's it. That's it. Every other possession that resulted in a touchdown was because of a big play that happened. The Jaguars scored a touchdown on every possession that they had a big play. That is the reality of the NFL. That's the reality of college football. Do you know why more points are scored in college football than there are points scored in the NFL? Because college football is all about big plays. Just is. The widened hash marks gives you, a wider side of the field, right? More field for the defense to defend usually leads to more big plays. Okay? That is why scoring in college is greater than it is in the NFL. So you have to generate big plays on offense in order to score, and defensively, you have to limit them. The Colts have to find a way to limit big plays. And yes, coverage calls on that matter. How much you blitz matters. Like all those things, everything that Gus Bradley has control of obviously plays a role in that. It does. But here's the other thing. Big plays usually happen when tackles are missed. Take the Tank Bigsby 65-yard touchdown run. When coverages are blown, which can't happen. We can't have Julian Blackmon in the back of the end zone yelling at somebody for not being where they're supposed to be. Okay, like that, seems like not very ideal. And then you can't have, your secondary defenders biting on double moves. Like that can't happen either. That's why, Brian Thomas Jr. had that 85-yard touchdown reception. It's because Dallas Flowers bit on a double move. Right? Like those are player things. Those are not coaching things. Okay? Like EJ Speed can't miss 6 tackles. That can't happen. You can't have that from your linebackers. Either one of them. Like they have to be better. So yes, while Gus Bradley deserves some of the blame, and Chris Ballard deserves some of the blame because these are the players that he went out and drafted and got, and his refusal to sign free agents outside of Raekwon Davis, like all that deserves part of the blame. But ultimately, the players on this Colts defense, like they are professionals. They are getting paid a whole bunch of money. At some point, we have to hold them accountable as well. Okay, not saying that we aren't, because I know we have on this show. I know Dan has on his show, but ultimately, the players are the ones responsible for the amount of points that have been given up by the Indianapolis Colts this season. When we come back here in about 4 minutes or so, Jared Dubin of CBS Sports. He's an NFL writer over there, lives in New York, does a lot of stuff for the Jets, does a lot of stuff for the Giants. Obviously, the Jets firing Robert Saleh yesterday. A bunch of different news, rumors are coming out about Aaron Rodgers and kind of his role in all this. I'm going to talk to him about that when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Often imitated, never duplicated. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Tickets, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. I told you at the start of the show, I've got two great interviews happening today. Tony East at 11 to talk Pacers, and Jared Dubin of CBS Sports, NFL writer, right now. Jared has an article up on CBSSports.com talking about the Jets firing Robert Saleh. And while he may or may not have been an issue, Joe Douglas is also a problem. Jared, how are you, man?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
Man, I'm doing really, really well. So let's just cut right to it. Do you think that Robert Saleh, New York Jets head coach, should have been fired?
It's hard to say no because it's not like the team was great under his leadership. It just seems like they fired Robert Saleh, to my estimation, to solve what is really a Joe Douglas problem. The roster is not good enough, straight up. And when you look at the player acquisition during Douglas's tenure, it's been really bad. Like the hit rate on their early draft picks is not particularly good. They've landed four guys that look like stars, and Quentin Williams and Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, Sauce Gardner. Elijah Vera Tucker's a good player, but that's like 5 picks out of whatever it is, like 20 during his tenure. The free agent acquisitions that got them on the story up on the site, there's like maybe 2 or 3 hits in there. It's like C.J. Mosley, a couple other guys. The trade acquisitions they've made have been really bad. And throughout Saleh's tenure, the defense has been awesome. It's arguably been the best defense in the league since he got there. And obviously the head coach is responsible for both sides of the ball. But when you foist an offensive coordinator onto your head coach because that's what the quarterback wants, I don't see how holding him responsible for the struggles on that side of the ball, which is really, really where they've been bad so far this year, I don't see how that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm with you. So it's anytime that Aaron Rodgers is involved in anything, it doesn't matter what it is at this point. Like, there just feels like there's extra drama. And so after Saleh got fired, all these different rumors came out. I saw this one report that, Saleh was planning on firing Hackett, but then Aaron Rodgers heard, and it's like Aaron Rodgers got Saleh before Saleh could get Hackett. It feels like a weird, like, mafia movie storyline there. And I was just kind of curious, like, you're in New York. Have you heard anything like that?
I hadn't specifically heard that. I believe that was our lead NFL insider, Jonathan Jones, who reported that. And if he says it, I'm, just going to take his word for it. He knows what he's talking about. He talks to everybody in and around the league. And, if that's what he said was going to happen, then I believe that for sure.
Okay. Joined by Jared Dubin, NFL writer for CBS Sports. You can find his latest article on the Saleh firing at CBSSports.com. Was the Jets trading for Aaron Rodgers, was the Jets trading for, then 38-year-old Aaron Rodgers worth all of this extra stuff that's just kind of come with it?
The version of Aaron Rodgers they thought they were getting, maybe. The version that they're actually getting on the field this year of, a 40-year-old quarterback who is coming off torn Achilles and seems at least somewhat disinterested in playing the way he did when he was an MVP a couple of years ago. I think it looks a lot like his last season in Green Bay, but with less mobility, which is obviously a concern. And I mean, this version of him, obviously, no, it's very obviously not worth what they gave up for him or what they've had to deal with since he's been there. If they were getting, the MVP guy of the previous 2 seasons before his last year in Green Bay, then yeah, combined with the defense that they had, that would have made for a real contender, even with the other offensive shortcomings that they have, along the offensive line and with the scheme and elsewhere. But they haven't gotten that guy for, reasons that make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think you're exactly right. This version of Aaron Rodgers is not worth this trade at all, and that's not even factoring in the whole Egypt thing and skipping OTAs and all that kind of stuff. How quickly do you think Robert Saleh lands a defensive coordinator job?
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it happened by next offseason. I wouldn't think that it's going to happen during the year. That's obviously not the kind of thing that generally happens. I wouldn't be surprised if, similar to someone other coach, when some other coaches get fired, if, let's say the 49ers or the Texans or the Dolphins brings him in as like a defensive consultant in a few weeks.
Yeah.
So that still may not happen. But, as far as a defensive coordinator job, he was really good at that job in San Francisco. And I wouldn't be surprised if he lands another one, this coming offseason.
In a strange way, joined by Jared Dubin, NFL writer for CBS Sports. You can find his article on the Robert Saleh firing at cbssports.com. In a strange way, I kind of feel like Saleh's a winner in all this because, like, the Jets are just a total mess. That's kind of what it feels like. And I feel like for him long term, like he'll, like you said, he'll get hired pretty quickly as a DC somewhere, probably do that for 3 to 5 years and then be up for head coaching jobs again. And hopefully he ends up somewhere where he can actually have a quarterback. Do you think that in a strange way in all this, Robert Saleh is really a winner?
I mean, I don't think you're ever a winner when you lose your job, but I do think that he looks a little bit better than the Jets do in this situation because everybody's like, hey, this guy's a defensive coach leading a really good defense, and your offense is the problem, and we all know why, and you're holding him responsible. You guys kind of look pretty stupid here. I feel like that's sort of been the general consensus to the firing, even if people are saying, like, it's not like Saleh. It's not like we know he's a really good head coach and there's no reason to do this. Like, the team was, I think, 26-40 during his tenure. And, obviously a lot of that is owed to the quarterback and the roster. And at least during the first few years of his tenure, not getting the offensive coordinator hiring right the first time around. But it still, I think, leaves people a little bit confused and kind of more on the side of a coach who hasn't had that much success than you would usually expect people to be just because of the situation there.
Yeah. So with all this that's happened, despite all of this, the firing and, the clear issues that are happening there in New York, the Jets are only a game out of first place in their division. If they win Monday night, they're in sole possession of first place. With that being said, do you think that Jets fans are enjoying the Aaron Rodgers experience so far?
You know what? I'll have to ask some of my friends. I can't imagine that they are. But, I will go ask them, and I'll let you know after the show.
Sounds good. Joined by Jared Dubin, NFL writer for CBS Sports. I do want to ask you some non-Jets, Aaron Rodgers related questions. So I think that there have been, like every year in the NFL, there are things that happen that no one really sees coming. And I feel like the two things this year are the Vikings being 5-0 and the Bengals being 1-4. Which do you find kind of more surprising?
I mean, I guess it's the Bengals being 1-4. Like, I obviously didn't expect the Vikings to be 5-0, but I expected them to be at least competent. We saw what the defense did under Brian Flores last year, and I think we've seen that Kevin O'Connell is able to scheme offenses into success almost no matter who his quarterback is. Like, at the end of last year with Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins, they were putting up a whole ton of yards and points despite the fact that, they didn't really have a starting caliber quarterback. So that side of the ball having, a bit more success than I thought it would is not necessarily surprising. Them winning all 5 of their games, especially in the fashion that they did some of them, is obviously surprising. Cincinnati typically starts somewhat slow, but like losing to the Patriots throws off basically everything else that has happened in the start of their season. And, 3-2, 2-3, whatever. Sometimes you get off to a slow start, but 1-4, man, like they're in a pretty deep hole. And I don't know really how you climb out of that.
I don't either. Despite them being 1-4, I watched them play. Like their game on Sunday was incredible. The Ravens are just really good in their own right. And I walked away and I was like, I still feel like the Bengals are good, even though they're 1-4. Do you kind of feel the same way?
Yeah, I mean, at least on offense, like they can move the ball, they can score from anywhere on the field. The problem is every offense looks like the Bengals offense against the Bengals defense. You can do whatever you want against them. They're one of the worst teams in the league stopping the run. And I mean, against the pass, they've been almost as bad. And you saw over the last few weeks, like teams can do pretty much whatever they want against that group. And it's, a far cry from what we saw a few years ago when, they had one of the better defenses in the league, and Lou Anarumo can sort of scheme up basically anything he wants to stop even the best quarterbacks in the NFL, or at least, contain them. Like, Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes. You think about the performances those guys had against the Bengals 2 and 3 years ago. It looks a lot different than what Lamar was doing against them Sunday. But, the attrition and personnel over there over the last few years, and some of the guys that are still there, basically other than Trey Hendrickson, not being at the same level they were a few years ago. You couple that with losing guys like Jesse Bates and, some of the other guys that they've lost up front, especially on the interior, and the early draft picks that they've made not really being at the level of the guys that they were replacing in the lineup. And it's just not the same unit on that side.
Joined by Jared Dubin, NFL writer for CBS Sports. You can check out his article on Robert Saleh being fired over at CBSSports.com. Kind of staying in the NFC North with the Vikings. The NFC North, I think, is the best division probably in the NFL, at least to start the year. Any chance that every team from that division makes the playoffs?
That's really tough because then you're talking about, nobody else or no other division gets a wild card. And, these teams all have to play each other. So you're guaranteed, I'm not going to do the math, but whatever that is, like 8 or 9 losses, depending on how many total division games there are. So it's just really difficult to get all 4 teams in just because of the math.
That's true, but do you agree with the idea though that that's probably the best division in the NFL, at least to start the year?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly looks that way. I believe they're all over 500, which has got to be the only division in the NFL where that's true. But they also mostly haven't played each other all that much yet, and that affects things going forward.
Of course it does. Yeah, you're totally right on that. The 49ers, they're one of the teams that are not 500. Are you concerned about them at all?
It's hard to say. Like, I feel like they should be able to get things going more offensively than they have been so far. Obviously, they've been dealing with some injuries. The defense is one I'm a little bit more concerned with. They've got some injuries there now, too. I wonder what it looks like if and when Drake Greenlaw is able to come back. Obviously, he's coming off an Achilles tear, which is like one of the worst things that you can have for a guy who is not a lineman, just because of how much you have to move around and how much you need to push off of that. But they have, one of the, 5 or 6 best defensive linemen in the league. They have a guy who is, a star shutdown corner in Charvarius Ward. Their safeties, I think, are good. Obviously, Fred Warner might be the best defensive player in football at this point, at least so far this year. And it's at least a little bit strange to me that they haven't been able to be, the level of defense that they were a few years ago. So I'm interested to see what happens on that side of the ball. If they can sort of get things going in a similar way to last year at the start of the year. They weren't playing at the level you would expect them to, but once Steve Wilkes sort of settled in on that side of the ball, they got better. But, it sort of wasn't a, personality and team fit in the way they wanted it to be. So they went back to one of their in-house guys with Nick Sorensen. So, we'll see what happens on that side. I'm not necessarily too worried about them in the big picture just yet, but it's got my radar up, I guess, is what I would say.
If they lose tomorrow night, is that kind of when the worry will settle in? Because at that point they're 2-4.
Oh yeah, I mean, for sure, especially given like the Seahawks injuries on defense right now, and how basically, like, you saw the Giants ran the ball at will against them last week with Tyrone Tracy, even though, Malik Neighbors wasn't out there. If they can't move the ball consistently against Seattle, and if they can't figure out a way to stop, like you saw the Giants basically completely shut down Seattle's run game. Ed Walker had whatever it was, like 18 yards. Yeah. Like, if they can't figure out something on either side of the ball against Seattle tomorrow night, I think that is pretty worrisome for sure.
Two more questions for you, Jared, and I will let you go. Joined by Jared Dubin, NFL writer for CBSSports.com. You can check out his article on Robert Saleh being fired over at CBSSports.com. So, because you're a Cowboys fan, I have to ask you just how you feel about your Cowboys, who are, can I say, surprisingly 3-2? I mean, I don't know. What do you kind of think about your Cowboys so far?
I don't think I've changed my opinion on them from what I've had for the last several years. They are a very talented team that is not serious because they are not a serious organization, and they don't really make an effort to alleviate the problems that are very obvious to everyone except for Jerry and Stephen Jones.
Fair enough. Last question for you, Jared. So, in addition to writing for CBS Sports, Jared also covers the NBA on his own. You can find his stuff on the NBA at lastnightinbasketball.com. Preseason stuff has started, and you know how it is. Like the NFL, people freak out over preseason stuff. I think the NBA is the same way. With that being said, Zachary Ricochet is probably the least exciting number one overall pick since Anthony Beckett a decade ago, or Bennett, excuse me. Like, and he played really well last night. I don't think I've asked you about just kind of your thoughts on the rookies for this upcoming in NBA season, but what do you think about Ricochet and just kind of those top picks?
Yeah, the one thing I'm worried about with Ricochet is that he doesn't seem to be a very good athlete. And when you are going to be a big guy or a wing in the NBA, not having that baseline level of athleticism is kind of difficult to overcome. You have to have such a high skill level to be able to do it. And, I haven't seen that much of him just yet. I did my sort of, dive into the film, and I sort of crammed before the draft for both the NBA and the NFL because I cover two sports full time. So there's not a lot of time to get into those guys during the season. And I spend like a few weeks doing a crash course before the draft comes around. So I haven't seen as much of him, obviously, as guys who cover college or cover the draft or all those kind of things. But I'm interested to see if he does have that sort of skill level to be able to overcome things, because it's difficult to be able to do that. But it's not a particularly exciting rookie class. I think we knew that throughout last season, where people were like, this is one of the flatter first rounds in recent memory, and the guys that are going to go in the top 2 or 3 in this draft would probably typically go, in the back half of the lottery, like the 8 to 12 or 14 range in a typical draft. And that's just sort of the way it went.
Yeah, fair enough. Jared, thanks for your time, man.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You got it. That is the great Jared Dubin. You can follow him on Twitter at JADubin05. You can read his basketball stuff at lastnightinbasketball.com, and you can read his NFL stuff at CBSSports.com. He's got a good article up on Robert Saleh being fired and kind of the Jets' deeper problems beyond that. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, I've got thoughts on the Pacers. Tony East, he's set to join me at 11 o'clock to kind of preview the Pacers season. They started their preseason stuff last night, so why not talk Pacers today? Pacers thoughts when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Thanks to Jared for joining me last segment. He's in New York talking, Robert Saleh getting fired by the Jets and all that. So big thanks to him. Check out his article over at cbssports.com. He's got a whole thing on Saleh getting fired and all that. I want to move on, though. I want to talk Pacers and why the Pacers have a reason to follow the Colts blueprint. The Colts like their guys. That is no secret. And the Pacers like their guys, too. They brought everyone back except for Jalen Smith, and they replaced him with James Wiseman. Sure, they drafted some rookies, but all those rookies are going to spend most of their time with the Mad Ants. Okay, so while the Colts like to bring everyone back after going 9-8 and missing the playoffs, the Pacers prefer to bring everyone back after making a run to a young, exciting team that made the Eastern Conference Finals. One seems to make a little bit more sense than the other. And part of the sense of it is the age of the players. The Pacers core, right? When you look at the four guys that it seems like is going to, kind of be the future of this team, they're all young. Like Tyrese Halliburton isn't 25 yet. Andrew Nembhard and Benedict Mathurin are only in their third years. Jarris Walker can't drink yet. Okay, the older players that they have are solidified. Meanwhile, when you look at the Colts, it's just a lot of question marks. Like the older players are fine. The young players, it's like, I don't know, maybe. We'll see. But, Pacers, the young players seem promising. And the old players, like I said, are solidified. Pascal Siakam is a solidified top 30 player in the NBA. Miles Turner has been the exact same player for the last 10 years, except now he's a reliable three-point shooter. Okay, you know exactly what you're getting with TJ McConnell. Those are the only three players on the Indiana Pacers that are going to consistently play that are 28 years of age or older. Everyone else is younger. And when I look at the Colts, if the Colts had a young core like this that they wanted to bring back, even if they'd gone 9-8 the year prior, then I think I would be fully on board with that plan. I'm assuming Colts fans would be on board with it, but that's just not how the Colts are. The Colts want to bring back a not old, but also not young and developing roster that didn't make the playoffs last year. Once again, one direction of a franchise makes sense, and the direction of the other doesn't. One franchise is set up for success, and the other one isn't. One franchise seems to be a shoo-in for the playoffs, and the other doesn't. And it's not hard to figure out which one is which. Like when I sit back, this upcoming season and I watch the Pacers play, if they stay relatively healthy, then I know exactly how I'm going to feel heading into every single game. Every single game that they play in the regular season, it's going to feel like they should win, right? Because I've seen this Pacers team win. I've seen these players on this roster win not only in the regular season, but I saw them win playoff games. I know that they played teams that were injured. I don't care. Okay, because seeing young players win in the playoffs is not common, whether their competition is banged up or not. When I watch the Pacers play this year, I'm going to watch them with this expectation that they're going to be good. I'm going to watch them with this expectation that they're going to make the playoffs. And then I compare that feeling and that expectation to what I see from the Indianapolis Colts. When I watch the Colts, this upcoming Sunday when they play against the Tennessee Titans, one of the worst teams in the NFL, I don't expect them to win. I think they will, right? But it's more of a hope. It's like I hope that the Colts can go on the road to Tennessee and beat one of the worst teams in the NFL. And then the following week when they play against the Miami Dolphins, I'm going to sit here and be like, man, I think they're better than the Dolphins. Like they should win that game, but it's more of a hope than it is an expectation. Whereas the Pacers, I'm going to sit back. I'm going to watch them play a lot this year because if you're new to the show, hi, Jonathan Smith. I love basketball, so I'm going to track the Pacers all year long. And like I said, I'm going to expect them to win consistently. Meanwhile, when I watch the Colts, I'm going to hope that they win. That is one of the biggest differences between these two franchises and why one feels like it's on a path for success while the other feels like it's just been, running in place for the last, 4 years. Okay? And one of the other differences between these franchises is that the Pacers are run well. They seem to have a good owner. The president of basketball operations has done a good job. Okay, like you've seen from the beginning that they had this plan. They go out, they acquire young star Tyrese Halliburton. They draft well. It's very evident what they want when they're drafting players. They want tall, long, athletic dudes that can shoot the basketball. Okay, like that is clearly what they're looking for. I can see the plan that Kevin Pritchard and the rest of this Pacers front office has. Like it's evident. Right. And that's why they're in the process of potentially, we'll see what happens, building something special. Meanwhile, the Indianapolis Colts have an absent owner. Okay. Jim Irsay dealing with some health issues, doesn't seem as invested as he has been in prior years. So the owner is absent. They've got a general manager and Chris Ballard who hasn't had success since Phillip Rivers was the quarterback for 1 year. And it feels like it's slowly falling apart. Like I'm sitting here and I'm just kind of waiting on Jim Irsay to hit the reset button. But because he's a little more absent than he has been in prior years, I don't know if he's ever going to hit it. Okay, like everything starts at the top. Okay, like I'm lucky enough to have had good bosses at the 2 radio places that I've worked. Okay, before I got my degree, though, I wasn't working in radio, obviously. I worked in fast food. And working in fast food isn't fun, and it's made all the worse when you have a bad boss, bad owner, bad managers. Okay, so when I was in high school, I worked at Chick-fil-A, and it was an absolute pleasure to work there. Okay, because the owner was awesome, very accommodating. He was great. The managers, very active. It felt like the managers did more of the grunt work than like the normal red shirt employees like I was. It was really nice. It was refreshing. I felt like they were working, alongside me as opposed to just telling me what to do. I had faith in the management at the Chick-fil-A that I worked at. Then when I went to college, I worked at Taco Bell for 2 weeks. Like some of the worst weeks of my life. The managers were some of the worst human beings I've ever met. That is not hyperbole. And the owner was worse. Everything starts at the top and it trickles down. And as it trickles down, it impacts everything underneath it. And when we look at the Indianapolis Colts, their issues start somewhere at the top. Maybe it's Chris Ballard. Maybe it's Jim Irsay. Maybe it's Jim Irsay's daughters. I don't know. I have no idea. But there's clearly some sort of issue at the top of this Indianapolis Colts franchise. Meanwhile, the Pacers, I don't know. I talked to Eddie White on the air last week. He made everything sound great. Seems like everybody's pulling in the same direction. Okay? And that is an important thing in sports. You have to have people pulling the same direction. And in the Pacers building, it feels like they are. Okay, the plan that the front office has is pretty evident, right? We've seen the development and the improvement of this, Pacers team, throughout the last, 3 years, right? You go back 2 years and they were just kind of this fun offensive team that scored a lot of points, but they were young and they clearly needed some development. And then you see them at the start of last year. Right. And it was, they kind of felt the same, young, developing, fun, but they had clearly improved and gotten better. And part of that was that their star, Tyrese Halliburton, had gotten better. And then they bring in Pascal Siakam right before the trade deadline. Right. And then you just kind of, you see him take a step back as Halliburton was hurt, but then he comes back and he and Siakam clearly meshed pretty well together. And then you see him go on this run in the Eastern Conference Finals. Right? Like we're seeing the improvement. We are seeing the process of the rebuild. Whereas like the Colts, it's been the same mediocrity for the last 4 years. Seriously, like it's just been nothing but mediocrity. I don't feel like players are getting better. I don't feel like they're adding anybody. It feels like they just continue this cycle of running it back. They just continue this cycle of Chris Ballard drafting offensive or defensive linemen in the first round and then trying to fill in the gaps from there, but not use free agency to fill in those gaps. Well, one franchise is moving forward, the Pacers. The other one feels like it's just running around in circles. And that is an issue. And when that's the issue, there's no hope. Chris Ballard needs to be fired, right? And so, bad owners don't win. I'm not to a point where I'm willing to say that Jim Irsay is a bad owner, but he does feel a little bit absent. I need him to fire Chris Ballard. That way we can figure out what the issue is. Is it Chris Ballard or is it the owner pressing all the buttons? That is currently my biggest question about the Colts. Who is the issue at the top of this franchise? Is it Irsay? Is it his daughters? Or is it just as simple as Chris Ballard isn't very good at his job? It's one of those three things. I'd like to figure it out. And the only way to learn that is if they fire Chris Ballard, right? But if Anthony Richardson improves to a point where he's a franchise quarterback, then they won't touch a hair on Chris Ballard's head. And that's the thing, right? If you can sign a quarterback or draft a quarterback that is great, then it makes everything else seem okay, right? That's what the Bears are hoping for with Caleb Williams. That's what the Broncos are hoping for with Bo Nix. That's what the Washington Commanders appear to have in Jaden Daniels. I have a legitimate question. I've been thinking about this. The best NFL game on Sunday is the Commanders and the Ravens. It's in the 1:00 window. Late in the year, we see the NFL flex games in and out of prime time. I would like to see them do that every week because I once again, like when you look at the schedule for this Sunday, like the Monday night game, it's Bills Jets. They're not touching that. Winner, grabs, first place in that division. But the Sunday night game is the 1-4 Bengals taking on the 2-3 New York Giants. I don't think anyone really cares about that game. All right, can we flex the Ravens and Commanders into that nighttime slot? Because I think people would be much more interested in that game, the Lamar Jackson versus star rookie quarterback in Jaden Daniels matchup. I think people would enjoy watching that for Sunday Night Football way more than they're going to enjoy Joe Burrow versus, Daniel Jones, Danny Dimes. Come on now. Even though New York, impressive win last week over the Seattle Seahawks, who play against the San Francisco 49ers tomorrow night. If you're driving around, not able to watch the game, tune in right here to Indy's Sports Ticket. Okay, you can listen to the game while you're driving around, taking your kids to ballet or whatever it is that you're running around to. So when we come back here in about 5 minutes, the great Tony East, Locked On Pacers, okay, writes and covers the Pacers as well. He's set to join the show. We're going to kind of do a big Pacers outlook on this upcoming season that's coming your way here in about 5 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy's Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hope you guys are having a nice Wednesday. Joining me now, Tony East of Locked On Pacers, the man for all things Pacers. Follow him on Twitter at Tony R. East. Tony, what's going on, man?
Back. The NBA's back. The Pacers are back. It's crazy. It feels like they just ended, but such is life when you actually have a good playoff run.
That's exactly right. And we aren't complaining about that. I love this team. They were so much fun last year. That surprising run to the Eastern Conference Finals was incredible, not only just for content, but just for my entertainment. And I want to start with the Pacers over-under line in Vegas for the season. It feels criminally low. It's 47.5 games. That feels like an easy over, right?
Yeah, it's pretty tough. I did the whole schedule for them, picking all the wins. That's usually how I do the over-under to see what I get for that. And I got 48, so it was close. It's weird because, like, the theory of why they'd be better is so obvious, right? Like, it's the exact same team that made the conference finals last year, and most of their core players are young and should get better, right? So, like, that should be a better team than last season. And they have a couple additions who could play, I guess, that impact things. So it seems like an easy over, but I'm guessing what's going on is the rest of the East got a lot of improvement. You know, the Knicks got some mega talents. The Sixers acquired some mega talents. The Bucks got players that actually make sense and aren't just lemons anymore on their team. So I'm guessing the thinking is that even if the Pacers are better, those teams being a little better will offset that in a way that makes it harder for them to actually win more games, because to go from 47 to whatever, 50-51, the games you're winning that you lost last year are usually against those good teams, but the Pacers lost to a bunch of bad teams last year. So I bet they win a little bit more than last year, right, and take a step forward in that way. But I think it's going to be tough with the progress we've seen from their conference at the same time.
Yeah, that was kind of my thought process of just like they played really well against the good teams. You'd think that just being a year older, like being a little more mature, that they'd be able to beat Charlotte in Charlotte on a Tuesday night. So that's why I like the over. But you brought up how, you know, the Eastern Conference looks different, right? The Celtics, they're pretty much the same, but the Knicks bring in Karl Anthony Towns, no more DiVincenzo, which I'm kind of excited about because it felt like DiVincenzo just didn't miss against the Pacers in that series. The 76ers, like outside of Maxey and Embiid, it feels like they have just an entirely new roster. So obviously, you know, the Celtics, defending champs, they're scary, but kind of between the Knicks, the Sixers, and the Bucks, who do you think is kind of the second best team in the East?
I mean, if the Knicks stay healthy all year, I think it's definitely them. That starting five is nasty. I mean, Brunson was incredible last year, second team All-NBA. I think he should have been first team. They finally have great wing defenders, top to bottom. Hart and Anunoby and Bridges can all make plays on that end of the floor. As a defender, they're all good enough shooters to give them spacing. And now Towns gives them actual shooting. And I bet Towns leads the league in rebounding this year because he's by far the best rebounder in that starting five, right? Someone's got to get him. So altogether, it just seems like that group makes a lot of sense. And if they stay relatively healthy, right? Brunson played a bunch last year. They seem like a lock to me to win 55 plus games. Like they could, I think in the regular season, not the playoffs, they could push Boston. Whereas I think Philly's going to be good, but they're old, right? They could be a little creaky and slow at sometimes, and they're small. They need some size. And the Bucks are just, take what I just said about Philly and ramp it up, right? Their whole core is 32 or older, so they are susceptible to injuries and setting back. So I think if anyone's going to really climb into that Boston tier and be really scary for both the Celtics and the Pacers, it'd be the Knicks, who were already good last year, and I feel like they are comfortable saying, hey, if we had Anunoby the whole conference semifinals, we might have won that series. So they look pretty good. The problem is they are so top heavy, right? One injury, and the Knicks are in a lot of trouble. Their bench is super shallow. They really need Mitchell Robinson back, or they only have like 6 playable players. So in terms of how those teams match up with the Pacers, maybe you could quibble with that. I bet the Pacers would say they could do well against the Knicks because of their depth, but the top of the East is going to be tough for them in a lot of different ways. But I think they can keep up they did last year.
They did. How many games until Tom Thibodeau gets tired of Carl Anthony Towns.
Yeah, they did not get along in Minnesota.
No.
That'll be pretty fascinating. But I mean, he can't get mad at him, right? He's the only good center right now. The whole team's hurt.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued to kind of see how that works because, Tom Thibodeau likes to play his guys a lot. And, that it'll just be interesting to kind of see how all that develops. As excited as I am about the Pacers, I do think the Knicks are the most interesting team in the East this year.
Yeah, I do too. And I mean, they're interesting to me in a way, kind of like the Houston Rockets were during the Golden State Warriors run from a couple years ago, where it's like, I don't think they're as good as the Celtics, and I don't think they would beat them in a series, but I'm glad someone is going for it, even when there's another dominant team. It just adds for some intrigue and some fun. And I think the Celtics are still pretty clearly the best team in the league, but I mean, we haven't had a repeat champion in the NBA in 7 years. So in terms of the top of the East, what that could mean for the Pacers or the league in general, like, yeah, someone's got to try to beat those guys, and maybe some of their chemistry cracks start to burst open this year. But I applaud the Knicks for going for it at a time where it seems like there's a very clear best team. That's hard to do. It takes some stones.
It is. It's nice. It makes things just a little bit more interesting. Joined by Tony East, host of Locked On Pacers, which you can listen to wherever you get your podcasts. He writes and covers the Pacers and the Fever as well. You can follow him at Tony R. East on Twitter to see everything that he's putting out. So going back to kind of the opening press conference for the season, I heard Pacers head coach Rick Carlisle wax poetic for like 2 minutes about the importance of positional size on defense. We got to see more Jarris Walker if that's an emphasis from Coach Carlisle, right?
I think so, but here's the thing: like, who do you take out for him? I know everybody listening is just going to say Ben Shepherd right away, but the other thing that everybody's talked about in training camp is like, hey, Ben Shepherd looks pretty dang good, right? And the type of player he is, like, if you can make threes and defend, is extremely valuable in the NBA. So the trouble with what I agree with you that when he was saying that, I was thinking of Jarris Walker. I think everybody was, is like, how do you actually get him on the floor? Like, who do you take off to make that happen? Because that's the part that makes it not so simple. And yet they have, had him in the second unit in practices so far. And right, he played not major minutes, but was like a key part of their second unit in their preseason game last night. And Rick is right that positional size is so important in the NBA now, right? If you can get it on the floor, you should. So I think they're really hoping that Jarris Walker can develop into that guy. They would be a lot better if he was. I thought his defense was better than his offense in their preseason game, and I think everybody's right to continue to point out what he could, grow into on that end. But it's just really, it's hard for me to figure out how they actually get him on the floor, because there's so many other guys deserving of minutes who are also talented, and it's a good problem to have. I think Jarris should play this year if they can do it, and there's going to be injuries, right? There'll be chances for him to play, no doubt. It's just harder to do than, for a lot of other teams. They have a lot of depth. It's a superpower, but it's also a bit of a curse in this way.
It is, and because like when you look at the roster, it feels like everyone is deserving of some minutes. Like even James Wiseman, who's the new guy. Pacers brought, I think, literally everyone else back. Like that's a guy who played 15 minutes a game last year for the Pistons, albeit, but still like he's clearly a good, talented player. The depth piece, like that's kind of the interesting thing about the Pacers, right? You mentioned the Knicks earlier being really top heavy. Like the Pacers are the total opposite, which is nice because if someone gets hurt, like you've got several guys who can step up and contribute, kind of like last year with Mathurin going down. And that's the guy that I'm really excited to see this year. Like I felt like before he got hurt, we were about to see him kind of take this next step offensively. Like, he was shooting 37% from three. He was starting to hit some stuff kind of off the dribble. What do you kind of expect from Mathurin in year three?
Yeah, his post-All-Star game stretch, which albeit was pretty short, was really good, right? And so people were thinking, maybe he's running into form. And of course, McConnell doesn't take off the way he does if Mathurin's healthy the whole season. But yeah, it's a huge kind of year for him. Year three is typically like a turning point time. You have your first year to figure out the whole NBA thing, and then your second year you get a little better, and then your third year your team really wants to figure out who you are, and you need to show who you are, right? I think similarly for Andrew Nembhard, it could be a big year as well, just because of all that kind of stuff. But with Mathurin, right, like it's all about the same stuff. It's been with him for forever. And I think this year is the most I've been confident that he knows what it's going to take to get on the floor, to play more, to be the guy the Pacers want him to be, right? Because he knows it. It's about fit. It's about moving the ball quickly and executing their style. And I think last night, even though he was 2 for 7, he was doing that. Like, he would catch and he would immediately try to get the ball to a teammate or try to get the ball moving somewhere else. His drives were still threatening. He got to the foul line. He did Ben Mathurin stuff. But the more he recognizes that that's what he needs to be and not just like score 20 points every night kind of guy, that's what I think the Pacers really need and hope to see. And he's clearly very good, right? Like, rookies who get the foul line as much as him, basically all have turned out to be exceptionally good players, right? Like, Michael Jordan barely cracked Ben Mathurin's free throw rate his rookie year, right? It's rare how impressive he was for a first-year player at that time. It's just the rest of his game matching the Pacers' style that clearly works is what the problem has been. I don't even know if you could call it a problem necessarily. He's still good. So I think that's going to be maybe the biggest story for the Pacers this season, just because it kind of defines what their next path is, right? Are they going to be trading Ben Mathurin for a piece that makes them, a contender for the next however many years? Or is he that piece? Is he already on the team? They don't need to trade him for it. And I think he knows what it's going to take for him to be the player that they need and be the team that they can with him hitting his ceiling. And he started to show some of that stuff last night, but it's got to be every night consistently kind of stuff, whereas last year it kind of came and went in ways that I think would be frustrating for the Pacers. So I'm looking forward to seeing it. It's going to be really fun.
Joined by Tony East, host of Locked On Pacers. He also covers the Indiana Pacers digitally for everyone, SI, The Next Hoops, Forbes Sports, WTHR, pretty much everyone. Are you more excited for year 3 of Andrew Nembhard or year 3 of Benedict Mathurin?
Well, I am the highest on Andrew Nembhard of anyone alive, so
Okay.
I'm not the right person to really answer that question. I said last year before the season that I thought Andrew Nembhard could be the Pacers' X factor. That wasn't accurate, but I think late in the playoffs, I at least was sort of redeemed about why I thought he could be so special for this team. I mean, I don't know if I'm sure you watched last night. For those who didn't, like, the Hawks could not keep him away from anywhere on the court. Like, wherever Andrew Nembhard wanted to go, he just went there. He walked there, he dribbled there, he backed someone down, whatever he had to do, he got there, right? Like, he did that against the Celtics in the conference finals, the best defense in the league. And he's like, yeah, I'm just going to drive and score whenever I want. And he didn't do that all season. So it's right for people to say, well, can he actually do that for a full season? What's that look like? But it's just, if you can get to your spot, and he's got this little mid-range thing in his bag of tricks that's impressive. He's a really good defender. He fits really well with Tyrese Halliburton. Like, maybe he just never has the on-ball volume to, like, really dominate statistically because Siakam and Halliburton are his teammates, but just really talented, really sharp player, really good defender. I'm really high on what he can be, even if he wasn't on the Pacers in the system that they have. And I think that in the way they play, he's going to be really, really good. And the third year was like, that's when Halliburton became an all-star for the first time. That's when Siakam won Most Improved Player for the first time of his career. And then he was an all-star the very next season, right? Like, that's typically when guys start to really hit their stride, as I just talked about with Mathurin. I think for him, I'm not saying all-star, obviously. That's really hard to do, but he's got the chance to be really good this year and really establish that they do have really talented players, right? I think it's possible we're talking about him as the third best player on the team, as soon as the end of this season. He's been that good so far in camp, and I think he's got that kind of potential.
Wow. All right. Really excited for Andrew Nembhard. I hope you're right, man, because I like him. He's bigger than I think people realize. You said, he just kind of gets
big too.
He does, can definitely guard 2 guards. Honestly, as long as he's not having to guard Jalen Brunson, I feel pretty comfortable about him defending. So
he did well on Trae Young last night. And I get that Trae Young's small, but just like, I think the taste in people's mouth about his defense is, oh, he just got cooked by Jalen Brunson, and he did. They had to switch up that matchup, but he did really well on a really talented guard last night in those moments. Like, he's that kind of player.
He did. And the truth of the matter is Jalen Brunson cooks everybody. So, like, I'm not really concerned about that. Something I am concerned isn't the right word, but I mean, you've watched the NBA long enough to know that, like, in the playoffs, depth is cool, depth is important, but it's really helpful if you have the best player on the floor in the series. What do you think is kind of Tyrese Halliburton's next step to kind of improve his game, to go from being like a top 15 guy in the NBA to like a solidified top 10 guy?
Yeah, defense would be an obvious starting point to that question. Just stopping anybody. He's not a particularly good defender. He knows that he said it. He even said it at media day. I thought this was really interesting that, I've always said, I think he's a pretty good, team defender, right? Like, he knows where to be. He jumps in passing lanes at the right time. He was like, no, I'm not as good at that as, I thought last year, I was too all over the place on that end, and I was in the wrong position all the time. Unlike that, to me, was very revealing. One, that he is studying his defense at that level, and two, that, if he's not good at that, he's really not a good defender, because his on-ball defense is very weak. That's something they have to cover for all the time, is they, put other guys on other teams' best players and stuff like that. So for him to really take off, I would say it's defense. He's got to guard better, which is obvious. And really for the team, that's a big deal for everybody, because he's already one of the best 5 to 10 offensive players in the league, I think. We saw that last year. That's why he was an All-NBA player, despite, really not being himself for the last 3 months of the season. But he's got to guard, and that has not happened throughout his career at all. And he knows it. And that would really change what they could do defensively right there. They're so limited. They have to put right now, literally have to put, Nembhard and Nesmith in the starting 5, because those guys are playing with him to guard the other team's best players. And, they have so much more lineup versatility if they can put Halliburton on certain guys, or if they can just switch up how that goes. So that's the next step for him. And the other thing would be some off-ball stuff. And I think we saw that last night, that he was off the ball quite a bit with Siakam and Nembhard handling. They were both really good. So I'll be curious what he thinks the next steps are, but that's kind of how I see it going for him.
Yeah, I'm excited to see him. He just signed a big shoe deal, which is, huge. I don't know. Like, I don't want to be the guy that makes a big deal out of nothing, but I don't know. I feel like sometimes when players kind of start to get recognition, it can kind of not ruin them, but it can slow down their development a bit, because it's like everyone kind of knows who I am now, and guys can kind of relax based off what you're saying about Halliburton. It doesn't seem like that's the case. So I'm very excited to kind of see where he goes this year. Hopefully he can improve on defense. And I think you're right about
it's funny. It's funny you say that, because that was my first question to him at media day, was what is motivating you now? Because he just got paid. I didn't even know about the shoe deal at the time, but it should have been obvious when he was sticking his Doc Martens up on the desk in front of us. and he made All-NBA and won a gold medal. Like, he had last year, the last year of Tyrese Halliburton's life is like an incredible career for a lot of players. Yeah. 1 year, right? So how do you all of a sudden turn around and go, okay, I got to play every day, get motivated, get ready to go? So that's my first question, is what is motivating you now? And he has never had a problem being motivated or needing stuff to get, some idiot with 2 followers can be like, hey, you suck, and he'll take that to heart for a whole game. But that's what I was curious about. And he said that he felt like the team is still not getting a ton of respect after what they did last year, right? And he wants to prove that it wasn't a fluke, or prove that injuries were not the reason they were really good. And so and he's right that the whole team thinks that way. We've gotten that sense talking to them all week. So I think that's really what he feels, and how the team feels, is that, yeah, maybe he is getting a little bit slighted, and he is still a terrific player, and he thinks he has more to show. And so, yeah, certainly we'll be interested to see what that looks like, because he's only 24. He still could get better, but you're right that some guys in his situation would not necessarily put the time in to really try to improve it.
See, this is why we have you on. This is journalism at its finest. That's a great question to ask.
I was ready for a question. I did not even know what's coming. That's what this is all about, right?
That's right. That's right. Joined by Tony East, host of Locked On Pacers. He also writes and covers the Pacers and the Fever. 2 more questions for you, and I will let you go. James Wiseman, they're bringing him in. I don't think he's going to play a ton. If he does, what does he kind of bring to this Pacers team?
Yeah, I also don't think he'll play a ton. He started last night, but not because he's going to start, because their whole team was hurt, especially at center. They didn't have Turner or Isaiah Jackson. I think that he's going to score efficiently. He made all of his shots last night. I think he's going to get a bunch of rebounds. He got 2 offensive rebounds last night. And I think they are going to be begging for him to be a better defender all year. Unfortunately, I mean, that's been the problem for him his whole career. That's why he's on, minimum deals now. And he is talented. He didn't miss last night. He set good screens. He finished little flip shots in the lane, all this stuff that the Pacers are like, yeah, okay, this is fine. There's clearly utility for him on the floor, which is going to matter. But his defense is going to be, I think, a frustrating part of this season that they're going to try to be working on all year, right? Getting him to guard better is going to be a never-ending goal. It's been a never-ending goal for him literally his entire career. And I think it's to say that he'll be the 3rd center, and he'll definitely play a lot, right? Center is the most injury-filled positions in the league. basically on any team. He'll still get on the floor fairly often. I bet he plays 50-plus games this year, but how much he plays and how effective he is will kind of define what they need from him. And last night, I think everybody said, yeah, the offense was good, but the defense was not so good, and they're going to have to figure out how to balance all those things.
It's going to be interesting. Like we both said, though, I don't think he's going to play a ton. It's going to be a lot of Miles Turner, who's in year 10, by the way, which is
that's unbelievable.
It really is. Joined by Tony East, host of Locked On Pacers. Follow him on Twitter at TonyREast to see everything that he's up to. Last question, and I'll let you go. WNBA Finals. They're here.
Yeah.
Lynx, Liberty. Kind of give us your thoughts on that series.
Yeah, I predicted both semifinals wrong, so maybe I'm not the right person to answer this question. I thought it was going to be Sun Aces. That said, it's been really interesting because the Liberty have been the best team all year, right? And they've been tough for anybody to beat, and I'll be fascinated to see if they can keep it rolling because Sabrina Ionescu's at a new level. Like, this is the best she's ever looked in her career. They got her moving off ball really well in that last series they just played against Vegas, and I think that really changed that series. I'll be curious to see if they can keep that going in the Lynx. Like, this, I give so much credit to Cheryl Reeve because when I was trying to figure out, okay, can the Fever be a top 8 team this year? Can they actually make the playoffs for the first time since 2016? One of the teams that I thought could be in the bottom 4 was the Lynx, who were 19-20 last year and were returning some players, but they made some trades. No one really knew if they would take off or if they'd flounder. And they had the second pick 2 years ago. Maybe they'd prioritize, getting her on the floor more. There was just like a lot of kind of factors going on with a lot of people thinking they wouldn't be this awesome, and they've been incredible, right? A well-deserving finalist because every night one of their role players shines. Kayla McBride's been really good all year. Bridget Carlton's been really good all year. Courtney Williams has been good all year, and they just keep coming at you all night. And of course, Fee's amazing, the defensive player of the year and the MVP runner-up. So I think the Liberty are going to win. I think they're probably going to win in 4 or 5 games, but I don't want to be the one who writes off the Lynx for what they've been doing all year. I mean, they keep doing this. I don't know how, but they keep winning and surprising me, and they deserve credit for that. I bet they keep doing it at least to some extent in the final series.
All right. Sounds good, Tony. Thanks for your time, man. There's no one better when it comes to covering the Pacers and the Fever. I appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
See ya. That is the great Tony East. Follow him on Twitter at TonyREast. You can check out his Locked On Pacers podcast as well as all of his writing if you follow him there. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, new segment. We're going with Winners Wednesday, new segment. I'm getting into that when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
The best takes, stories, and entertainment. It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket. 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hope you guys are having a nice Wednesday. New segment, Winners Wednesday. I just want to highlight some of the winners from the week on Wednesdays, okay? Because we care about winning here at the show. That's the whole point of sports and competitions, to go out there and to win. So I'd like to pay homage to the winners of the week on Wednesdays. Let's start with Curt Cignetti being 6-0. $3.5 million bonus for being bowl eligible. First coach since Ryan Day at Ohio State to start his first season out of school 6-0 at a Big Ten school. Okay, this is IU's second 6-0 start in football history. The program's best start ever was 8-0 in 1967. And Curt Cignetti could top that. He could. They play Nebraska and Washington in their next two games. Those games are definitely tougher compared to the other opponents that Indiana has played so far this year, but Indiana can win those games. Then they get Michigan State, who's not very good in year one under new head coach Jonathan Smith. The road to 9-0 is incredibly possible, and that would be the best start in Indiana football history, and it is really in grasp. For the first time in a long time, people are excited about Indiana football, and it's not just in Bloomington, it's not just in Indiana. I've got friends of mine that don't live in Indiana. They live in, Dallas or Arkansas or Tennessee or wherever down there in the South, and they'll call me. They're like, "Hey, Jonathan, how about those Hoosiers?" I'm just like, I know. They're a good football team. Indiana is on the verge of being more than just a statewide story. Like, there is real momentum around this program, not just here in Indiana, but I think nationwide, and it's great to see. Congrats to Coach Cignetti for the big bonus. It's well-deserved, and hopefully he can keep it rolling, because 9-0 seems like a real possibility for this Indiana football team. Next on the list for Winners Wednesday, Tyrese Halliburton. New shoe deal. Signed a new deal with Puma. I'm assuming it's worth a large chunk of change. It should be. He's been rumored to be Puma's new face. We'll see if that happens or not. Either way, he's completely deserving of this. If you heard Tony East in that last, little segment there talking Pacers and just the upcoming season, like, Tyrese Halliburton's one of the best point guards in the NBA. He was the best player on a team that made the Eastern Conference Finals last year, played on Team USA, won an Olympic gold medal. And when you look at the other basketball athletes that Puma signed, I mean, he's far and away the best basketball player on that list. Like, the most notable basketball player that Puma signed outside of Tyrese Halliburton is LaMelo Ball. Puma signed him a few years ago. Ever since they did, he's been hurt. Okay, it makes sense that Halliburton would be their new face. He doesn't get in trouble. He's one of the 15 best players in the NBA, could be a top 10 guy by the end of the year, depending on if he improves defensively and if he improves offensively as well. So big winner this week is Tyrese Halliburton. Basketball season almost here. Can't wait. If you're new to the show, I love hoops, and really, really enjoy it. So congrats to Tyrese Halliburton. Next big winner of the week is the Houston Texans. Oh, like, Jonathan, why are the Texans winners? Is it because they're 4-1? No, the Texans are winners because Drake May is making his first career start against them on Sunday. Texans have an incredibly easy path to being 5-1. Okay, because the Patriots already aren't very good. I like Drake May, but this isn't exactly the first defense you want your first start to come against. Okay, Houston should absolutely destroy the Patriots on Sunday, who are now playing a rookie quarterback behind an offensive line that couldn't block me. Okay, that's how bad that Patriots offensive line is. Drake May is going to spend his entire afternoon running for his life. That's the reality of it. Why they didn't wait 1 week to have Drake May make his first start against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have the worst passing defense in the NFL, I don't know. That's beyond me. But hey, Patriots, do your thing, I guess. Last one here. Last person making the winner Wednesday list is Robert Saleh. Robert Saleh got fired, which I know isn't fun, but I would argue he's a winner in all this. First and foremost, he doesn't have to deal with Aaron Rodgers anymore and that circus that's happening in New York. I would hate to work in that Jets building. Anytime you have to work with someone or employ someone who thinks and really is more important than everyone else, it's an issue. Like it is. Like you can't convince me that Aaron Rodgers didn't play a major role in the firing of Robert Saleh, even though, he was forced to hire Nathaniel Hackett, Aaron Rodgers' guy. I think Robert Saleh is a good coach. I'm not going to fault him because Joe Douglas decided to draft Zach Wilson with the number 2 overall pick. I'm not going to fault him that Joe Douglas decided to go out and trade for a 38-year-old quarterback coming off of a bad season in Green Bay, who then tore his Achilles and is now 40 years old and the starting quarterback. Not his fault. Also, the Zach Wilson stuff, yeah, he doesn't even dress out for the Broncos. He's the third-string quarterback. Tough to win games when that's your guy. So I know people throw out the record, but in reality, if you knew what you were talking about, you wouldn't. You would just realize that Zach Wilson's terrible. And there's like 3 coaches in the NFL, Kevin O'Connell, Kyle Shanahan, and Sean McVay, that could probably win games with him as their starting quarterback. Okay, Robert Saleh did an excellent job during his time in New York. The Jets defense has allowed 1 touchdown in the last 3 weeks. And the Jets were like, yeah, this guy, not a good enough coach to continue to be there. The Jets are 1 game out of first place in their division. And the Jets were like, yeah, he's not good enough, which is kind of ridiculous. Also, since Robert Saleh showed up in 2021, the Jets have been first in points per drive, first in EPA per play, third in success rate. Like he has consistently put together not good, but great defenses that he's been there. And they're like, yeah, we're good. I do think he's a winner in all this. Like I said, it sucks to get fired, but like, does it really? Like they're paying him a whole bunch of money to go away. Okay, he gets paid this entire year to wake up on Sunday and to watch football, just like me and you. Wouldn't you like to be paid 7 figures to just wake up in the morning and go watch football? That sounds pretty great to me. On top of that, this offseason, he's going to have his pick of defensive coordinator jobs. He'll do that for 3 to 5 years, and then he'll have another head coaching opportunity. He's a good coach. He just never had the quarterback to win. Okay, and we talk a lot about coaches and how important they are, and they are important. But ultimately, you had to have the dudes, right? And if you don't have a guy under center who can make plays for you, you just aren't going to win very many games. And I think Robert Saleh is evidence of that. Despite getting fired, I do think that he's coming out of this a winner. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, I've got thoughts on the Indianapolis Colts. Gus Bradley, he addressed the media yesterday for, 10 minutes. I want to kind of recap that press conference and, our inability to move on, that whole bit when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Unadulterated sports talk with unfiltered takes. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice Wednesday. Hopefully Gus Bradley's having a better Wednesday than, the Tuesday that he had. Gus Bradley sat with the media yesterday for 10 minutes. And, for 9 of those 10 minutes, he was asked repeatedly about the Jacksonville Jaguars game. What happened against the Jags? Why'd you give up 37? All that kind of stuff. Here's my thing. It's Wednesday. We all know what happened against the Jacksonville Jaguars. We knew yesterday. And at some point, we all have to move on to the Tennessee Titans. We have to start to look ahead. Okay, we got to quit worrying about, what happened against Jacksonville. It's in the past, right? But look, it's hard to move on. I get it when you're upset, frustrated, confused, right? The Colts had 2 good defensive performances against the Steelers and the Bears. Felt like things were moving in the correct direction. And as I've been thinking about the Colts and the defense and the letdown that they had against the Jags on Sunday, there was a specific memory of mine that came to my brain. And it, when I was thinking about what was going on with the Colts, it seemed like things were going in a good direction, and then it all fell apart. Sounds a lot like the first time a girl ever broke up with me. And I'm assuming that if you've ever been broken up with, the first time that it happened to you, one, you remember it, and it was probably something similar. I'll never forget, I didn't date until I got to college because when I was in high school, I was dumb and I lacked Riz, as the kids say. Okay. Thankfully, though, when I got to college, I figured it out, all that kind of stuff. And I was dating this girl. She went to a different school, which usually when people say that, they're lying. But in this case, I wasn't. She legitimately did. So we had a long weekend. It was Labor Day or whatever. And I was like, okay, 3-day weekend. Let me go out and see her. So I did. I make this trip out to her school. We hang out all weekend. I had a good time. I thought she had a good time. Turns out she didn't. I go home, not even a week later. I think it was 2 days later. I get a phone call. She breaks up with me. I was upset. I was frustrated. I was confused, much like a lot of the Colts fans were after that horrendous defensive, performance on Sunday against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I'll never forget, she breaks up with me. I tell my buddies, 2 of my best friends show up. We go and they take me and we go get Frosties because, who doesn't like a Frosty ever, right? Love Frosties. Good stuff. And while we're there and we're eating ice cream or whatever, one of my buddies asks me, he goes, how long do you think it's going to take you to move on? And I was like, 2 weeks tops. Okay, it's going to be easy. I'm going to move on so fast. No big deal. And then the other guy that was with us chimed in. He was a bit older, a bit wiser, really nice guy. He looked at me. He's like, bro, there's no way. It's going to take you a little bit longer than that. And I was like, whatever, man. And he ended up being right. It took me probably a month and a half to kind of move on because it's hard to move on when, bad things happen. Okay. After watching the Colts on Sunday, I feel like it's hard to move on to the Titans and to focus on what's coming up because the Colts are 2-3, right? And it feels like they could be 3-2 if the defense had just done their part, right? It's hard to move on because that was the worst performance we've seen from this Colts defense this year, heading and, during a game after putting together back-to-back good performances against the Bears and the Steelers. And it's okay, they're going on the road to Jacksonville, the House of Horrors, the place they never win. But, the Jacksonville Jaguars, they're the second worst offense in the NFL in terms of points per game. This should be a game that the Colts win. And then, it seems like things were destined to go well. And then Trevor Lawrence is like, you know what I'm going to do now? I'm now going to appear to be a competent quarterback. I'm going to hit deep balls. I'm going to complete over 80% of my passes. And this Jacksonville offense is we're going to score 37, even though we've been averaging 15 points a game through the first 4 games of the year. And when that happens, it's hard to move on. And I got on Twitter last night and there were people still talking about it. There were great baseball games that happened yesterday, but I got on Twitter and my feed's littered with people complaining about this Indianapolis Colts defense. And the media is still talking about it and thinking about it and confused by it. That was blatantly obvious when they got to talk to Gus Bradley yesterday. And Gus Bradley's taken a lot of heat. I appreciate him giving good answers in this press conference, despite the heat that he's taking. Because there are some guys like Brian Dable. Earlier in the year, he was asked if, he should continue to be the head coach of the New York Giants. And he didn't answer. He was like, yes. And then he just stared the reporter down. It was very intimidating if you saw the video, right? That's what some guys do, but not Gus Bradley. He did a good job, I thought, of giving good, thoughtful answers. And for 9 of the 10 minutes that Gus Bradley answered questions, the questions were all the exact same. They were all in some way, shape, or form about Jacksonville. It took this Indianapolis media 9 minutes to ask him the one question that I wanted the answer to and that I'm assuming you want the answer to. And it was Stephen Holder, who, raised his hand in theory because, Zoom. And he very simply asked a question: what's the plan moving forward after cutting Dallas Flowers? What's the plan moving forward while dealing with all these injuries? And how do you improve off of a horrendously bad performance against the Jacksonville Jaguars on Sunday? And here's what Colts defensive coordinator Gus Bradley had to say to that question.
Well, first of all, let's talk about Dallas. I mean, love Dallas, love coaching him and what he was all about. He's a great man. And, this business is unfortunate that way. And, we've all been a part of it, going through tough times and challenges. And, I could go into more depth about him, but just as far as him as a man, but I have great respect for him. Now, as far as the roster, here's what I told the group, and here's what I think is important. Right after training camp, when we got together and we just named our 53, looked them in the eye and said, you all earned your opportunity to be a part of this 53. You were handpicked to be part of this 53. And, that because we trust you, because we believe in you, and we believe that if anything happens, you'll step up and make plays for us. So when I look back at it, we picked these 53. So that means if there's multiple injuries that take place, then these guys need to step up and they need to get their opportunity. We believed in them enough to bring them in as part of the 53. Now, when they get their chance to play, they got to showcase their abilities. And, that's what we're challenging now, to get them to believe that, we do have some injuries, but everybody has injuries across the league. And it's the guys that, there's always a story that takes place with these players, that come on, like Sam. I think Sam's playing, pretty good right now. He's doing some good things. He's making some plays. There's a story, we just got him, a week before the first game, and here he is playing, so there's stories that take place with these younger guys getting opportunity. And that's kind of the message to all of them. Be that story. Be that guy that we believed in to be a part of the 53. And when you get your opportunity, you shine.
That was Colts defensive coordinator Gus Bradley talking about what this defense needs to do going forward. No surprise there that he was very complimentary of Dallas Flowers. I appreciate that he didn't make any excuses when asking about injuries, because he's exactly right. Everyone has injuries. Everyone has to deal with them. And he's also right in the idea that he helped pick the 53-man roster. Obviously, Chris Ballard has final say, but Gus Bradley had a role in how they constructed this defense. Gus Bradley had a say in how they made up the depth of the roster. And these players that they chose need to step up. Samuel Womack, great example of someone who stepped up to start the season despite the injuries that have happened. Okay, the players on the field have to perform. Okay, and look, whether they do or not, if anything goes awry, Gus Bradley's going to be the guy that takes the heat, right? Because the defense has struggled underneath him during his entire tenure here in Indianapolis. The criticism is well-deserved. But to be fair to Gus, he didn't miss the tackles on Sunday. They led to a Tank Bigsby 65-yard touchdown run. He wasn't the one who bit on the double move that led to the Brian Thomas Jr. 85-yard touchdown pass. He wasn't the one who did that. The players on the field have to be held accountable. The players on the field are the ones who are making the plays. And look, I don't expect for these backups to be perfect. Okay? If the backups were perfect, then we would all raise the question of why haven't they been starting? Okay? But here's the truth. The offenses get paid as well, right? So you're going to give up some big plays here and there because the guys on the other side of the ball are getting paid and are also good at the sport. They're also professionals. But at the same time, this Colts defense could undoubtedly be a lot better. the amount of explosive plays that they gave up against Jacksonville has to be reduced. Okay, like when you look at the game against the Bears, sure, Caleb Williams threw for 300 and however many yards, but the Colts didn't give up very many big plays, so they kept the scoring down. Against the Steelers, they gave up a couple big plays to George Pickens and some guys, but when they did, they were able to force a turnover. They forced a fumble in the red zone and all those things, right? But outside of that, like they didn't give up a ton of big plays against Pittsburgh, and that's why they were able to win that game, right? And that is really the key when you look at the NFL. If you want to win games, you have to do two things. On offense, you have to create explosive plays. And on defense, you have to limit explosive plays. I remember after week 1 or week 2, I came on the air and I talked about the importance of explosive plays. And I explained that I would rather have a guy like Anthony Richardson who can convert and make these big explosive plays downfield over a guy that consistently hits the 3rd and 4 out route. Because when you look at the NFL and you look at the best offenses in the NFL generate big plays, and the best defenses in the NFL limit them. Okay, it is hard in the NFL, any league for that matter, to put together a 14-play drive that results in a touchdown. It's difficult to be that consistent. So you have to have big plays. Just look at the game on Sunday. The Indianapolis Colts scored 24 points in the 4th quarter. And it wasn't because Joe Flacco converted 3rd and 5 every time that it came up. The reason why the Colts scored 24 points in the 4th quarter was because Alec Pierce got open down the field for big plays 3 times. That is why the Colts scored, and that's why they erupted in the 4th quarter. They were able to hit some big plays downfield. Okay, when you look at the Jags and the drives that they scored touchdowns on, every possession they scored a touchdown on, they had a big play, whether it was the 85-yard touchdown pass, the 65-yard touchdown run, okay, whatever it was. All right, the Colts have to find a way to hit on more big plays, even though they scored 34, and that should be enough to win. But more importantly, defensively, because I do think that's the thing that we're all concerned about, defensively, they have to limit the big plays. And part of that is going to be impacted by what Gus Bradley calls. Okay, it is. Whether, he's running his cover 3, whether he's blitzing or doing, a too high look, like whatever it is. Okay, like obviously the defense that he calls is going to have an impact on whether or not teams have big plays. But what's going to have a bigger impact on whether or not teams are able to pull off these big plays is what the players do. Okay, like if the players are missing tackles consistently, like they were on Sunday against the Jags, they're probably going to give up a bunch of big plays. If the defensive players on the back end of the defense have a miscommunication and there's a busted coverage and Julian Blackmon's yelling at somebody because they weren't in the right spot, then the Colts are going to continue to give up big plays. If, corners like Dallas Flowers, even though he's gone, bite on a double move, the Colts are going to keep on giving up big plays. Those are player things, not coaching things. Not knowing where to be and having a busted coverage, that's not on the coach. That's on the player for not paying attention, not getting the call, not double checking. That's on him. Biting on a double move, like that is on the player. That is not on the coach. Missing 6 tackles like EJ Speed did against the Jacksonville Jaguars, that's not on Gus Bradley. That is on EJ Speed. These are player things, not coaching things. And so, yes, while Gus Bradley can be better and needs to be better, the players have to be better too. at.to, first-round pick, selected 15th overall. I like him. I think he's done some good things this year. He hasn't gotten after the quarterback as much as we all thought that he would, as much as Chris Ballard thought that he would, calling him the best pass rusher in the draft, selling him as this guy that was incredibly ready, to start the season, a guy who'd be able to come in and make an immediate impact. He hasn't really done that. He hasn't. He's got 1 sack. That's it. It was a big sack. It was a sack that the Colts needed. It helped them clinch their win over the Bears. Like outside of that, like we haven't seen or heard from him very much. And that's an issue. Like he has to be better. Zaire Franklin and EJ Speed have to be better. Okay, like the only guy on this Colts defense that I feel like has consistently played well is Grover Stewart. I feel like he's done a good job filling the run. I feel like he's done a good job of getting a push up the middle. he's the only guy that, it really feels like is playing well. Hopefully that continues, and hopefully some of these other Colts defenders follow suit, and hopefully some of these other Colts defenders can get healthy, because that is an issue for this team, but it is not an excuse. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to listen to The Real Jonathan Smith Show. I'll be back on the air tomorrow from 10 to noon. Can't wait. Hoping to get a Titans guy on here either tomorrow or Friday. I'll keep you updated on that. The Dan Dockett Show comes your way here in 5 minutes. You don't want to miss it. Download that Indy Sports Ticket app so you can tune in. I will talk to you tomorrow at 10 o'clock.